Good evening, Professor. Good evening, classmates. Today, my topic is whole language. My contents: introduction, why I chose this topic. My first point, how language is understood. Second, the goals of language learning. Third, how languages are learned. Fourth, how languages should be taught. Fifth, the roles of teachers and students. And I'll finish with my conclusion. Why did I choose this topic? In 2008, I wrote an article. It was published in the English Teaching Forum by the Department of State, U.S. Department of State, entitled Applying Reading Research to the Development of an Integrated Lesson Plan. I had students at my school where I was working at, 6th grade students in Verbo Divino was the school, and they were not reading very well. So I did research on how language is learned. Two approaches, phonics, the other is whole language. What I discovered is that each one of those are not mutually exclusive. If you use one, it does not mean that you can't use the other. So I combined both of those and developed an integrated lesson plan and intervention to improve their reading. And we'll take a look at something that I did with that. Now, you can get this article at English Teaching Forum, or you can ask me and I can send it to you. My first point, how is language understood? Rigg, 1991, tells us that the major purpose of language is the creation and communication of meaning, and this is always done in a social context. Her article was called Whole Language in TESOL, 1991, TESOL Quarterly. Further, language is not the sum of its parts. It is greater than the sum of its individual parts. Finally, as Adelska here tells us, 1993, she's quoted in Brown and Lee, 2015, in Teaching by Principles, the 4th edition, that language is a system of social practices that both constrain and liberate. Now, what does that mean? It means here that we have an agenda. What is the agenda? Critical, because we want to empower students to go out into the world and have the capacity and the will to change their world and to believe that they can do that. And that is one of the goals here of understanding how language is used in this approach. How language is understood, a system of social practices. My second point, what is the goals now of language learning? We've got 3. Equity, democracy, and diversity. Those 3 goals is that we want a world that's fair for everybody. We want a world that everybody has a voice, and we want a world in which everybody has tolerance for diversity, that we're all different, but we all can tolerate one another. This is Adelska in her language article in the TESOL Quarterly, Whole Language in Perspective, 1993, still being quoted today by Brown and Lee. Now, my third point is how are languages learned? Language is learned by using it. Language is learned by doing it. Writing is learned by writing. We focus on the process, not on the product. This is Rigg and Adelska both in 1991. Now, another important point is that we integrate the 4 skills. We don't separate them. It is an inclusive approach in which the language is greater than the sum of its individual parts. Now, how should languages be taught then? My 4th point. Well, first, research shows us that what students are doing, children, they notice the whole before the parts. What does that mean for us for teachers? For teachers, we need to help students to attend to the wholes and resist the temptation to build language up from the bottom, because whole language is a top-down process where everything is holistic. And how do we teach them? The skills are interrelated, but beware that we do not separate. They're not to be separated. Now, finally, our job is to empower our learners and give them the agency, the will, and the capacity to go out into that world and make a change, and to meet and overcome whatever problem they face, social, political, or economic. Now, how should language be taught? In an authentic way with real activities, real, relevant to the students' interests, to their lives, and even to their communities. Again, the language is taught authentic, holistic, reality-based, with a purpose, always a purpose for the use of language, and to empower students to go out into the world, notice injustice, and make changes when they see this. And writing is real. Students write for themselves. They do not write for the teacher. It is realism. It is driven by real world needs for an authentic audience. Now, what is the role of the teacher? The teacher is a facilitator. The teacher is a realist. Why? Because this is student-centered, it's meaning-centered. That's the real world. That's the realist facilitator. The teacher is facilitating the language acquisition, the language use, and the reality, the purpose, the function that's going on there. We'll take a look at how the teacher does that. The teacher is also an evaluator. The teacher will evaluate in the same way that he's teaching, meaning-centered and student-centered, with a focus on meaning, a focus on the student. What is the role of the student? The student is a collaborator, the student is a communicator, and the student is the decider. Decide who you want to work with, decide what activity, decide what material, and use the language to communicate, focus on meaning, and collaborate in a collaborative fashion with your classmates. Now here, I wanted to show in my article where I am facilitating language. Now here you can notice that we have just finished a reading activity, and we have 10 minutes, and we're going to finish up the class here. It's a wrap up. 3 steps. First, the students will share with one another their personal reaction to the story that we just read. Second, in whole class, we will share reactions of the different students. It's a report. And then finally, in that third part, C, the students have 4 choices of activities that they can do for their homework. And it could be reading, it could be writing, it could be looking for how to make green eggs, because they read a story called Green Eggs and Ham. So this is the action phase of whole language approach, in which you're integrating all of the different skills. Now finally, my conclusion, whole language is an approach where the goal is for learners to create meaning. That's the learning. It's socially mediated, holistic, and authentic. And ultimately, it seeks to develop the capacity for fairness, democracy, and tolerance for diversity, a fair world, a place where everybody has a voice, and a place where everybody has tolerance for their individual differences. Thank you.